So what we figured we'd do now is, now that you're kind of warmed up and the ears are good, we're going to move into our first bit of discussion. We're going to talk about tone. Tone is the most subjective thing on the planet, and in regards to anything as far as guitars, you buy anybody's guitar. The first 3 lines of that warranty card say tone is not covered on a warranty. So what we want to make sure is that when you actually acquire that next fantastic instrument, you understand what it is that it's supposed to do. Everybody gets home, you get your guitar and you do this, right? It's like your TV remote, it does this. It has a general purpose. What we have is so many different flavors, if you will, of tonewoods and body shapes, and what happens is you start to kind of meld them together for your application. Certain guitars work really great for some folks in one thing, certain guitars work terrible for certain applications. So what we would do is we're going to let Aaron and Andy talk about the distinctions between some of our 4 or 5 most popular tonal combinations. We're going to keep the body shapes identical so that we have no smoke and mirrors. And we're going to demo them a little bit, and we're going to help you start to kind of find your fit, if you will. Okay?
We start with first Mahogany.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what body shape do we have over there?
So this is our GS5.
It's Grand Symphony.
So before we do anything, we just always going to have this kind of visual going. We're going to have bass on one side, and we're going to have treble on the other. Okay, we're going to try to give you a sonic vision, if you will. Mahogany is kind of our gold standard. So anytime we decide to build something new or work in new combinations, we always start with what we would consider mahogany cedar. It comes from Honduras, western red cedar for its top. And it's kind of our vanilla point. It's our canvas without any paint on it. We're going to use this as our 0 plane as we start to color with different tone woods.
Right. Let's play some real quick so you can get a reference point. So, like Mike was saying, this is the Grand Symphony body shape, and it lends itself well for everything, especially like if you're a strummer and like the sound of like the traditional Taylor sound. This is it, except a little bit bigger. Mahogany is like Mike was saying, the standard point. It's not too bass heavy, it's not too treble heavy. It's got a nice natural mid-range and a nice compression. Actually, when we were designing this is the first new body shape we put out since 1994. Bob Taylor was designing when he was, doing the different bracing or the different, shape wherever the waist was, or the upper bout or lower bout on the Grand Symphony here. He designed with Mahogany because other tone woods give you extra flavors, like Mike was saying, extra bass, extra treble, that sort of thing. Mahogany gives you a nice, natural, just straight mid-range. You get to hear what the body shape sounds like. And we love using cedar on Mahogany because cedar's got sort of a natural compression also. It kind of makes it a little bit warmer, a little woodier. So this is an absolutely great tone wood combination.
So as you're listening to these different guitars, one of the things to keep in mind, and Mike just mentioned it, was how we talk in terms of frequency response with all these different tone woods. And if you can kind of picture a graphic equalizer in your head, again, if you're looking at a graphic equalizer like on a stereo or in your iTunes on your computer, you'll have all the bass faders in the low end here, and then you'll have the mid-range faders, and you'll have the high end faders, right? So you can kind of think of tone woods in terms of the way that curve looks. And with Mahogany, we're not talking about tons of low end and tons of high end. We kind of bring it in a little bit, and you have a little bit of bump in the mid one. So it's sort of a flatter frequency response, but a little bit of bump in mid-range.
As we move into the 600 series guitars, the 600 series are always going to be graced with big leaf maple. And unfortunately, maple doesn't grow this color. We stain it. This happens to be a tobacco sunburst. It's funny on a side note, you'll notice a lot of times when you see acoustic guitars, if it has a full body color to it, it's typically going to be maple. Because some of the more exotic timbers out there have too much oil, So you can't really stain rosewood or some of the more, walnuts of the world. So anytime you see a full body color, it's typically going to be maple. Maple is very unique. It happens to be some of the most popular of the series that we sell, but it has some very specific needs, and it has some very specific voicing to it that you'll hear immediately different from the GS5.
Right away, what did you guys hear in the difference between the two with this one? Upper end higher, trebly, sparkly? Exactly, and that's what maple does. That's it's a great tone wood for that specific purpose. You heard a little diddly-diddly as Michael was doing. Those really jumped out at you, right? And his right hand, he was essentially, if he had an egg shaker in his hand, he was basically the drummer. It's a great tone wood if you are like a percussive player or you do a lot of strummy stuff. How many of you guys are familiar with Doyle Dykes? You guys seen Doyle Dykes play? Yeah, world fingerstyle champion of the world, and when he's just blazing those 300 notes per second at you, they all hit your ear at the same time, right? That's a testament to how good of a player he is too, because maple is a very unforgiving tone wood. If you're making a mistake, you're going to hear it right away, because the tone hits you right away. There's a quick attack and then it goes away. It doesn't have all these, like Mike's going to play a Rosewood guitar next, you're going to hear a lot of bloom and overtones and that sort of thing, whereas maple doesn't really have that. So.
Did you use the word diddly-do? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's what I heard. That's the diddly-do.
Coined a new technique.
Okay, so back to the frequency thing. If mahogany looks like this with a little bit of a bump in the middle, that maple thing kind of extends it on a little bit on both sides. However, there's less bottom end and you're going to have more high end. And actually what happens with that as a tone wood is that it has a lot of low end frequency response. It's there, but it decays really rapidly. If any of you already own a Rosewood back and sides guitar, you know that when you hit a chord on it, it'll ring and it'll rumble and the overtones keep generating and it wants to speak and talk for a long time. Whereas on a maple guitar, if you hit a chord and all the frequencies jump at the same time, what's going to happen is the bass stuff is going to get out of the way quicker as far as volume goes before the treble. So it ends up sounding brighter.
And in real life applications, you'll notice that maple kind of has some really exciting moments. If you're a worship leader or if you're in a band that has a lot of live activity behind you regarding drums and vocals, electric guitars, bass guitars, horns, since it has minimal overtones against some of the more exotic stuff, it's going to stand right out in front of the mix. And what that means is you don't have to really turn up the volume to its max potential to get all of the guitar you hear when the guitar is already by itself. It's also great if you're a home studio recording artist or if you actually work in a bigger studio. You don't have to EQ out some of those nuances that the guitar naturally already has. Okay? The last two guitars in this demonstration, they covet, what's considered to be the best tone wood on the market. We're talking about Indian rosewood, and I use that word best with bated breath because everybody says it's the best, maybe because it's supposedly the most expensive of the guitar that they're trying to sell you, or what have you. But rosewood is always so exciting because when Andy speaks to it in a moment about the EQ response, it just seems to gather all the extra things that maybe mahogany's missing, maybe that maple's missing, and now I've got something that makes me sound better than I potentially really am. The difference between the next two guitars, though, is going to be the top. And this is usually where I kind of want to give a quick thought on what an acoustic guitar is. It's 90% top vibration. So 90% of this entire thing is coming from this thing moving. And it moves up and down, it moves left to right, it moves side to side. And the sound hole's there because air needs to get out of the way. It's like a human chest. You breathe in, you exhale. The air has to move before you can take another breath. Acoustic guitars kind of work in the same way. So as the guitar is moving up and down while it's making what you hear happen, the air has to get out of the way so that sound can continue to happen. Okay? What you'll notice too is the enormous low-end swing here. It's going to be a lot more volume involved, and it's going to have a lot more chocolatey bass to it in the bottom end.
you hear that chocolatey bass?
Can you feel it?
Tasty. Rosewood, you're going to listen to the difference in these two guitars coming up next, because Rosewood is, you know, one of the classic combinations. We use Rosewood Sitka. Probably 80–90% of the guitars you see on a guitar wall are Rosewood and Sitka, because you do have all that nice bass response and a nice treble response too. And you'll notice the difference in these two coming up because they're the same guitar. This is a cedar top, which makes it a little warmer, woodier, like we said, and then the difference with the Sitka top. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so what the Rosewood does to the frequency response curve is it takes that original one, and the first one we talked about, remember, was Mahogany, and it extends it on both ends, so it's wider. There's more low ends, there's deeper low end, and there's more high end. And it kind of has a little bit of a scoop in the middle, right? So these are the things that we think about, and the reason maybe some of us have more than one guitar is because they all sound a little bit different. And if you think about putting two guitars together, for instance, like if we were to play the diddly-doos on the two different guitars, on the Mahogany guitar and the Rosewood guitar, you'd have one of them with a really wide frequency response with a little dip in the middle, and the other one would be kind of like this, right? They wouldn't be stepping on each other's toes. There'd be space for both of them. And it's just all, like he said, it's all subjective to what you think, but Rosewood, probably one of the reasons why Rosewood's such a popular tone wood is because of that scooped mid-range. You've got a nice spot for your voice as a singer-songwriter.
So what we're going to do is we're going to move right into the last guitar with the Indian Rosewood and the Spruce. In my personal opinion, and these guys may be able to validate, but I find that this is typically the loudest Taylor you can buy. You know, when you think drum sets, you think the bigger the box, the bigger the boom. Typically that is the case, but remember this, the more mid-range you're really trying to accentuate, not necessarily add, but just accentuate on a guitar, the more tapered the waist needs to be. So I would assume a lot of folks in this room grew up listening to music from the 60s, the 70s, a lot of singer-songwriter stuff. Traditionally that's been, you know, created on the Dreadnought. This is almost the same amount of real estate, but we've enhanced some of those mids by kind of pinching that waist a little bit. All of a sudden you've got a guitar that has just an explosive voice to it.
What models are they?
Say again?
What models are they that you're playing on the right? No, the ones on the right.
My left, GS7, GS8. Cool.
Probably heard more attack, like right away. You heard the notes hit your ears right away with this guitar. A little bit louder, a little bit snappier versus what the cedar top has to offer. If you're a fingerstyle player or a light strummer and want notes to kind of bloom a little bit more, that's what a cedar top is going to give you. So that's the difference in you know, what the two top woods have to offer as well as far as a soundboard. So there you go. There's the tone woods, yeah.
We figured what we'd do is we'd kind of round it out and give you this oddball connection by highlighting what we consider our build-to-order program. There's several instruments behind us that are one of a kind, including the one that Wayne's holding now. This is an all Mahogany guitar. It bears our newly designed and not necessarily created, but renovated armrest on the side. It's got what we call a mahogany stain to it. It's the only one on the planet that exists like that. The reason we want to mix this in against more of the traditional tone woods is so that you can hear what something with a little bit of a different bracing pattern sounds like, and something that has more of a non-traditional top. So I'm going to slide out of the way, and I'm going to let Mr. Johnson take over here.
Right? Sure. They even come tuned.
Working. Look at the itchy nose. Really, really warm sound.
Johnson. Before we switch into the next segment and talking about the expression system, which I think Wayne's going to demo two different ideas at once, I just wanted to make a mention about something. There's always that moment when you're trying to acquire the next greatest thing in your life, whether it's a new guitar or a new vehicle, perhaps you're looking for a new wristwatch or a wedding gown or what have you. And what happens is that there's always something really magical and special about something that you already own. And everybody who's ever tried to buy a guitar, and I've been selling guitars face-to-face a long time, always seem to say, well, Mike, I had to play 19 guitars to find the one, right? And I guarantee everyone in this place who's ever actually tried to buy a guitar has experienced that trial and tribulation of trying to acquire that next cool guitar. The thing is that there's something special that you already own. You're trying to find that something special in that next guitar. So what we say at the shop is that the difference between something good and something great is the story that goes along with it. Take, for example, this guitar that's got a piece of wood that's 100 years old on it. You find logs like this submerged under cold water reserve, and they only really become available when they're naturally dislodged, and you're lucky enough to find one. And then you're even lucky enough to mill it and find that it has just the most beautiful array of colors, but everyone's different. It'd be like buying a loaf of bread where every slice looked different. You'd probably put it back on the shelf. But with guitars, this is the kind of stuff that drives players and collectors alike just wild, because this has a story different than any other guitar on this stage. Same with the Coca-Cola Rosewood that comes with it on the back. It comes from Mexico. It's one of our most prized tonewoods on the back and sides out of our custom shop, because it's like a snowflake. It's like a fingerprint. Every guitar we cut, even from the same log, may have a different expression to it. So when you have the opportunity to find something that really speaks to you, that's what it's all about. Okay? Hope I didn't draw a tear to anybody's eye. Is that why I was getting applause? All right, let's change directions for a moment. And I'm definitely going to want my colleagues to help me on this one. Yesterday was my first day at Taylor. I'm just kidding. We don't assemble stuff. We create things, and we redesign something over and over and over again. Unlike traditional manufacturers, we don't have a model that has been in place for the entire duration of our company's history. This is a 37-year-old company, and nothing has stayed the same. When it comes time to taking something that you've already fallen in love with in your personal setting and trying to take that volume up into a public setting, electronics start to get really sticky. I'm never going to tell somebody that one thing is better than the other, regardless of the guitar, potentially the electronic system. But when it comes to Taylor, we know what we think sounds best for our guitars. And the expression system, which has been designed from the ground up in-house, has really taken the tone of the guitar that we've built and simply raised the volume. We haven't changed anything as far as the color of the frequencies. We're not adding or taking away. We just kind of can constrict, we can give and take on frequencies as they're naturally occurring on the guitar itself. So what these guys are going to do is they're going to give you a little bit of history on how the ES kind of works, and then we're going to let Wayne Johnson kind of demo the expression system, but we're going to demo it on one of our newly top 10 bestsellers, the 8-string baritone. And I can tell you that if you've never had the opportunity to experience a baritone, I bought the first one we ever made. It's something that's so different than just doing this. Everybody knows what the color red looks like in their mind, but if I really was showing you blue and I said this is red, you'd go, no, it's not. That's kind of the approach you get when you play baritone. You get to relearn everything you already knew, and you get to sing in a lower key. And so you don't sound like a 14-year-old girl anymore. Okay?
Yeah, sure. The expression system, we kind of say Bob Taylor has sonically the equivalent of dog ears, because he hears things nobody else does. He'll hear the weird harmonics of a different type of pickup and that sort of thing, and that's what he wanted to do. He basically wants to sit you down and say, yes, if you pick up this great guitar right here that you love the tonewoods, like that's why you're buying a guitar, right? If you're paying this much money for an all solid wood guitar, you love the tone of it. You love the tonewoods. If you're sitting in your 12 by 12 bedroom just strumming and loving the way it sounds, and then if you take that guitar and plug it into a monster PA in Wembley Arena, he wants it to sound the same. You want to hear the tonewoods, you want to hear, you know, the body shape, what you're actually paying for. So we don't want it to color any of that, you know, beautiful stuff that Mike was talking about, your chocolatey mid-ranges. You don't want those colored with a pickup system that's not going to be designed to enhance that. So that's what the expression system is designed to do.
Yeah, and it's an invention that's changing all the time. They're always working on it. They're tweaking it and trying to improve it every year as much as they can. And currently, what's in the expression system is a body sensor, and then excuse me, then there's a neck pickup underneath the last fret of the guitar. If Wayne shown where that is actually, pointed out, yeah. Underneath the last fret on the guitar, there's a magnetic pickup, and then there's a body sensor that's inside the guitar, and then you have a bass and a treble and a volume control. There's actually a guitar sitting down there watching from the front row right now that if you guys want to start passing that around out there, that you can take a look at and see what the expression system actually looks like inside.
Enjoying the show.
Oh, he was enjoying the show?
How come that guitar got a better seat than the majority of you? You know, the cool thing with expression systems, it kind of emulates what we have trouble with in California, and that's earthquakes. You know, so what we're doing is we're really magnifying the source of what's actually moving. You know, when I do smaller events and smaller roadshows, and I can actually physically hold what the expression system looks like in front of you, I tell you that it's kind of like taking a stethoscope and putting it right up against the top. It's capturing all that X, Y, Z action as that top kind of gyrates in all three directions. So what we're doing is we're just capturing every little nuance that's happening, and the body sensor is positioned in a place on the guitar where all kind of roads lead to one. All frequencies end up blooming and then dissipating in this similar same spot. So we figured out how to maximize the overall output. We figured out how to maximize the sustain and to actually capture all of that original tone color. And the last thing I'd mention about it is that it is an active system. And active means that you're using battery to push it. That means you can add to or take away. So if you don't see a mid-range knob on it, that's because if you take away bass and you take away treble, there's your mid-range, okay? So in either direction, you can go plus or minus in volume, bass, or treble. This is the second of 2 ever sunbursted baritones in our company's history.